The cold November wind in the Boston suburbs swirled the fallen leaves into the air. Martha Brown locked up the pharmacy and took a deep breath. It had been 3 years since she'd taken time off for Thanksgiving. As she got into her car, she felt her chest tighten at the thought of spending time with her family starting tomorrow. "It's not so bad. I'll be fine," she reassured herself. Still, the idea of going back to her parents' home stirred up anxiety and tension inside her, especially after what had happened 3 months ago. When Martha returned home, her husband John was preparing dinner in the kitchen. Seeing him made her feel a little calmer. Throughout their 12 years of marriage, John had always been her rock. "Welcome home," John said, kissing her. "Ryan's already packing. We should be able to leave early tomorrow morning." "Thank you," Martha gave a tired smile. "Did you tell my parents what time we'll arrive?" "Yes, I told them we'd get there sometime after noon. Charlotte and her family are staying there starting tonight." Martha let out a small sigh. Her sister Charlotte's relationship with their parents had always been perfect. Charlotte was the type of daughter who met her parents' expectations. She had graduated college with excellent grades, worked at a prestigious company, and actively participated in community volunteer work. And above all, her daughter Amanda was her parents' pride and joy. Martha walked to the living room and sat down on the sofa. Family photos adorned the wall, pictures of her with John and their 10-year-old son Ryan, all smiling. They were a happy family. Yet deep in Martha's heart, there was always a sense that something was missing, the unconditional love from her parents, something she had never felt since childhood. "Mom, have you seen my tablet?" Ryan came downstairs. His bright eyes gave Martha a sense of peace. "Wasn't it on the dining table?" Ryan ran to the table and found the tablet, looking satisfied. "Found it. I'm going to play games with cousin Amanda at Grandpa and Grandma's house." Martha smiled at her son's innocent joy. Ryan truly adored Amanda. 15-year-old Amanda was someone Ryan looked up to. She was a top student at school, played piano well enough to win competitions, and was adored by her parents, Walter and Carol. "Yes, I'm looking forward to it," she said gently. But behind her words lurked anxiety. Martha hadn't realized she was resting her hand on her stomach. 3 months ago, she had discovered she was pregnant with twins. However, during her 12-week checkup, the doctor told her that one of the fetuses had no heartbeat. As she grieved, the doctor had said, "This is natural," but Martha's emotional wounds ran deep. She had told her family about the pregnancy before it was confirmed. When she called her mother to share the news about the miscarriage, Carol's response was cold. "Well, you already have one child, so you should be grateful." Those words symbolized the complicated relationship she'd had with her parents for years. Behind them was an implicit criticism of Martha having a child easily, while Charlotte struggled to conceive. "Are you excited to see your grandparents tomorrow?" Martha asked Ryan. "Yes. Grandpa bought a new chess set. He said he'll teach me how to play." Ryan's eyes sparkled. Martha forced a smile. Her father Walter was generous with his grandchildren. But it was more obvious with Amanda. Last Christmas, Amanda received an expensive laptop while Ryan got a model kit. The difference was clear. "Mom, are you okay?" Ryan asked, noticing her expression. "Yes, I'm just a little tired," Martha answered, stroking her son's head. Ryan was a sensitive child. He understood his mother's pain and sometimes showed surprisingly mature insight. That night, as Martha lay in bed, she thought about Thanksgiving tomorrow. Charlotte and Amanda, her parents Walter and Carol, and her own little family. 2 days with everyone under the same roof. She unconsciously placed her hand on her stomach, as if protecting the remaining fetus. Her family didn't know that her pregnancy was continuing, that one baby was still growing healthily. Martha remembered the doctor's words, "The other baby is developing normally." Martha closed her eyes and fell asleep deep in thought. Thanksgiving morning was bright. From the passenger seat, Martha gazed at the autumn foliage outside the window. Her parents' house was in an affluent neighborhood in the Boston suburbs. A 2-story white house. The place where she grew up now felt somehow like someone else's home. "We're here." John stopped the car and gently placed his hand on Martha's shoulder. "Are you okay?" Martha nodded slightly. "Yes." Ryan leaned forward from the back seat, his eyes shining as he looked at his grandparents' house. "Do you think Cousin Amanda is here?" "I'm sure she is," Martha smiled at her son. As they walked along the path to the gate, she took several deep breaths. She wanted time to prepare herself before the front door opened. Martha's mother, Carol, opened the door. Her gray hair was perfectly styled, and a modest pearl necklace adorned her neck. "Finally, you're here," Carol's greeting lacked warmth. "Charlotte, Robert, and Amanda have been here since last night." "Hello, Mom," Martha tried to smile. "You look well." Carol gave Martha a light hug, then did the same with John. But when she saw Ryan, her expression softened slightly. "Ryan. You've grown." "Grandpa and Amanda are in the living room." Ryan happily ran into the house. Martha and John followed with their luggage. In the living room, Walter, Charlotte with her husband Robert, and Amanda were chatting. "Oh, Martha, John," Charlotte stood up when she saw her sister. She acted like the perfect hostess, greeting them both with hugs. But Martha felt the embrace was superficial. "Charlotte, how have you been?" Martha tried to meet her sister's eyes, but Charlotte quickly looked away. "Fine, been busy." What with Amanda's piano competitions and all, she glanced proudly at her daughter. Amanda was sitting next to her grandfather, teaching Ryan how to move chess pieces. She smiled at Martha, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. "Martha," Walter stood up and walked toward his daughter. "Have you been well?" "Yes, Dad," Martha kissed her father's cheek. Walter's manner was outwardly warm, but somehow distant. "John, how's work?" Walter changed the subject. "It's going well. We just started a new project." The conversation continued with superficial topics, the weather, work, Ryan's progress at school. But Martha could feel the tension hanging in the room. Charlotte seemed to be avoiding her, and Amanda appeared to be hiding.
Can you imagine making $10,000 a month just from YouTube, all from home? That's exactly what I did with Reddit stories. No face, no voice. Check the link in the description if you're curious.
Something. While helping carry dishes from the kitchen, Martha asked her mother, "Mom, has anything changed?" Carol answered while mixing mashed potatoes, "Not particularly. Although Charlotte has been a bit down." "Why?" Carol looked around and lowered her voice. "Another failed fertility treatment. It's hard for her. Especially considering that you already have a child." Carol's words carried a hint of reproach. "Charlotte had Amanda when she was 16, but hasn't been able to get pregnant since. She wants another child." Martha nodded silently. Her mother didn't mention anything about her miscarriage. Instead, she seemed to be ignoring Martha's pain by emphasizing Charlotte's fertility struggles. In the dining room, the Thanksgiving table was lavishly decorated. Turkey, cranberry sauce, mashed potatoes, pumpkin pie. Traditional dishes were arranged, and the whole family sat down. "Let's express our gratitude," Walter said. "First, I'm thankful that Charlotte has raised such a fine daughter in Amanda. She is our pride." Amanda smiled with satisfaction. Martha felt her hands tighten on her lap. "And we're also thankful that John and Martha's Ryan is growing up healthy." Walter's words were warm, but to Martha, they seemed thin compared to the praise for Charlotte. As the meal began, the conversation became superficial again. But suddenly Charlotte spoke up. "By the way, Martha. How are you?" After that, the table fell silent for a moment. Martha paused with her chopsticks and looked at her sister. I'm fine. Thank you. I see, Charlotte said, staring at her plate. We were really worried about you. Really? Martha's voice carried a hint of sarcasm. When she had shared the news of her miscarriage, she hadn't received a single call from Charlotte. Carol cleared her throat. Martha, how is your work at the pharmacy? The subject changed, and the tension eased temporarily. But Martha could sense something complex in the way Charlotte looked at her. Jealousy? Resentment? Or something else? During the meal, Martha noticed Ryan frequently checking his smartphone. Usually, they prohibited the use of electronic devices at the table, but today was a special day. Still, her son's behavior concerned her a bit. Ryan, what are you doing? Martha asked quietly. Nothing, Ryan hastily put the smartphone back in his pocket. But there was something like determination in his eyes. Martha tilted her head but didn't pursue it further. She wanted to avoid arguing with her son in front of the family at this moment. Time for dessert, Carol brought out a pumpkin pie. Everyone, bring your plates. As the family moved for dessert, Martha grabbed John's arm. Don't you think something's strange? I feel like Charlotte and Amanda are avoiding me. John squeezed her hand. Aren't you overthinking it? They probably have their own issues. I guess. Martha wasn't convinced but said nothing more. As they sat down at the dessert table, Amanda took a seat across from Martha. There was a coldness in her eyes that Martha had never seen before. The sweet aroma of pumpkin pie filled the dining room. Carol added whipped cream with a satisfied expression. The family's traditional recipe had always been her pride. Amanda, when is your piano recital this year? Walter asked his granddaughter. Clear affection shone in his eyes. Amanda smiled at her grandfather. It's on the 15th of next month, Grandpa. I'm preparing a special piece. Wonderful. Of course, we'll be there. We've never missed one of your recitals, Walter said proudly. Martha ate her pie quietly, listening to her father's words. Her parents had only attended Ryan's school presentations twice. They always said they were busy, but they never missed any of Amanda's events. By the way, Martha, Charlotte suddenly spoke. How are you doing, since then? Martha stopped her fork. Since what? You know, the miscarriage, Charlotte said as if concerned, but there was a strange gleam in her eyes. Have you recovered? The room's atmosphere froze for a moment. John glanced at Martha, but she was trying to maintain her composure. Yes, thank you. Getting better day by day, Martha answered briefly. She wanted to change the subject. But Amanda suddenly started giggling. Mom, you don't need to worry so much. Amanda, Charlotte reprimanded her daughter, but there was a small smile on her lips. Amanda ignored her and continued, after all, Aunt Martha already has a child. Losing one isn't such a big deal, right? Amanda. John's voice was low and stern. That's too. But it's true, isn't it? Amanda said defiantly. Aunt Martha has always gotten everything easily. College, work, children. Martha gasped. She was beginning to understand the depth of the resentment her sister's family harbored. Charlotte had struggled with infertility for years. After getting pregnant with Amanda at 16, she wanted another child but couldn't conceive. That suffering had manifested as jealousy toward Martha. Amanda, Martha began, when Amanda smiled again and said. Congratulations on your miscarriage. One less family failure, right? Those words brought complete silence to the living room. The color drained from Martha's face, and John clenched his fists in anger. Carol looked shocked but then began to laugh quietly. Walter followed, chuckling softly. Amanda. John stood up, his face red with anger. What? It's a joke, Amanda shrugged. Isn't that what everyone was thinking? Grandma said so herself. Carol stopped laughing, looking flustered. Amanda, I never. You did say it, Grandma, Amanda said coldly. Martha already has one child, so she should be grateful. Carol was at a loss for words. Martha felt her hands trembling. Well, if it were a smart kid like our granddaughter, that would be different. Walter tried to ease the situation, but his words only made it worse. Martha was about to stand up. She'd had enough. She wanted to leave this house. But before she could, a small voice was heard. Can you still say that after seeing this? Everyone turned to look at Ryan. Somehow, the 10-year-old boy had stood up from his chair and was holding something in his hand. His small voice carried adult-like dignity. Ryan. Martha stared at her son. Ryan slowly stepped forward and unfolded the paper in his hand. It was an ultrasound image. The sound of everyone in the room gasping could be heard. Mom is still going to have a baby, Ryan said quietly but clearly. There were twins, but only one is left. Martha was shocked that her secret had been revealed. She felt John's gaze, but her husband seemed surprised as well. She hadn't told anyone about the remaining baby. She was waiting until she could accept the reality herself. Martha, is this true? Carol asked in a trembling voice. Martha nodded slowly. Yes, Mom. I'm still pregnant. They were twins, but the heartbeat stopped. Why didn't you tell us? Charlotte asked. Her face had gone pale. I didn't have the chance, Martha replied quietly. And today, I've clearly understood what everyone thinks about my miscarriage. Amanda slumped in her chair, staring at the photo with confusion. Her arrogance had suddenly disappeared, replaced by an anxious expression. But do you know why one miscarried? Ryan spoke again. This time, he had a smartphone in his hand. Ryan, that's enough, Martha told her son. She didn't want to involve him in family disputes. But Mom, I want everyone to know, Ryan's eyes were brimming with tears. What Amanda did. Complete silence dominated the room. The color drained from Amanda's face, and she tried to leave the room. Sit down, Amanda, John's voice was ice cold. Ryan, what do you mean? Ryan pressed a button on the smartphone. A recording began. The first voice heard was Amanda's. Yes, Melissa. I put it in my aunt's tea. I mixed in an abortion drug. What? Amanda, isn't that a crime? Another girl's voice could be heard. No one will find out. It was a small amount, and my aunt already had a miscarriage. Besides, no one would suspect me. Grandpa and Grandma are on my side. Amanda's laughter echoed in the recording. When the recording ended, the room was enveloped in deathly silence. Charlotte stared at her daughter, speechless. Walter and Carol looked at each other, their faces showing horror and confusion. Martha felt her heartbeat pounding in her ears. She placed her hand on her stomach, curling her body as if to protect the remaining baby. Amanda, is this true? Charlotte finally managed to speak. Amanda remained silent, looking down. But her silence told everything. Why? Martha's voice was shaking. Why would you? John took out his phone with trembling hands. We should call the police. Wait. Charlotte cried out. She's still a child. Please, let's talk about this. A child? John's voice trembled with anger. 15 isn't a child. She knew exactly what she was doing. Martha felt her head spinning. The sense of loss she had felt, that pain, it wasn't a chance occurrence. It was deliberately caused. By her own niece. Ryan, how did you get this recording? Martha asked her son. Last night, I heard Amanda talking to her friend on the phone, Ryan explained quietly. I couldn't believe what she was saying, so I recorded it. Martha hugged her son. Her little protector. Her heart filled with warmth at the courage and sense of justice he had shown. Why? Martha looked at Amanda while asking. Why would you do such a thing? The air in the room remained frozen. Everyone was waiting for Amanda's answer. She fiddled with the tablecloth, keeping her gaze fixed downward. Amanda, answer, Charlotte's voice was unsteady. Why did you do that? Amanda raised her face. There were tears in her eyes, but behind them lurked something cold. Because Aunt Martha has everything. Everything? Martha said with disbelief. What do you mean? You've monopolized our parents' love, Amanda suddenly exploded. Mom always said, Martha was Grandpa and Grandma's favorite. Charlotte looked disturbed by her daughter's statement and began, Amanda, I never. But Amanda continued. That's a lie. You were always jealous of Aunt Martha. Martha went straight to college, but I got pregnant as a teenager and ruined my life. Charlotte turned pale. The room was filled with tension, as if the sound of truth being exposed could be heard. That wasn't your fault, Charlotte said in a small voice. And I've never resented you. But you resented Aunt Martha, didn't you? Amanda's voice was full of accusation. I heard you celebrating Aunt Martha's miscarriage. Finally, she knows suffering too. Carol opened her mouth. Charlotte, did you really say such a thing? Mom, Charlotte stumbled over her words and covered her face with her hands. Her shoulders began to shake. Martha stared blankly at her sister. She knew Charlotte harbored jealousy, but she hadn't thought it went this far. However, this didn't explain Amanda's actions. But still, Martha turned back to Amanda. Why would you harm my baby? She couldn't continue. I've always been special, Amanda said, her voice trembling. As the only granddaughter. And when I got pregnant, you felt threatened? Martha asked. Amanda nodded slowly. If you had a girl. I thought I wouldn't be special anymore. So you. John's voice shook with anger. Put drugs in her drink. Where did you get such a thing? The internet, Amanda answered quietly. It was easy. Walter suddenly stood up. His face was ashen, and his hands were shaking. I can't believe it. Our granddaughter. He was at a loss for words. Grandpa, Amanda looked to her grandfather for help. But for the first time, Walter turned away from her. We didn't raise you to be like this, he said sadly. Where did we go wrong? Carol was silently crying. Her world seemed to be crumbling. Martha. Charlotte turned to her sister. I'm truly sorry. I didn't know. Martha took a piece of paper from her bag with trembling hands. This is the doctor's report from 3 months ago, she said, trying to appear calm. Abnormal substances were detected in my blood test, but the cause couldn't be identified. At that time, I thought it was just a coincidental miscarriage. The report was passed around, and everyone saw it. Charlotte read it with a white face and looked at her daughter. Amanda, you. She was at a loss for words. We need to report this to the police, John said firmly. This is a crime. Wait. Charlotte cried out, crying. She's still a child. Give her another chance. A child? Martha said quietly. At 15, she fully understood what she was doing. Amanda suddenly started crying. Real tears streamed down her cheeks. I really feel bad. She said in a trembling voice. I didn't think. I thought only one would die. I didn't know there was another one. Martha felt her heart grow cold. The words, "only one would die," pierced her heart. "Why?" Martha asked quietly. "Why would you try to hurt my child when I've done nothing to you?" Amanda answered while sobbing, "I didn't want to lose Grandpa and Grandma's love. I thought they would forget about me when your child was born." "That would never happen." Carol cried out. "We love you. And we would have loved Martha's child too." She choked on her words. "We would have." Ryan held Martha's hand. His small hand was warm and had a supportive strength. Martha looked at her son and smiled. This little boy had become the guardian of truth today. "Mom," Martha turned to Carol. "You and Dad have always prioritized Charlotte and Amanda over us. That's a fact." Carol was about to speak, but Martha raised her hand to stop her. "But that's not important now. What matters is that my child was nearly killed. And another one is still alive, growing inside me." Martha placed her hand on her stomach. "I will protect this child. I'll do anything for that." "Martha," Charlotte said in a desperate voice. Forgive us. Forgive." Martha swallowed some of the words that came to mind. "I can't forgive right now. I need time." John took out his smartphone again. "I'm going to call the police," he said resolutely. "This is a crime. Deliberately giving abortion drugs to a pregnant woman. This is attempted murder." "No, please." Charlotte broke down crying. "Her life will be ruined." "She tried to take the life of our child," John said calmly. "She should face the consequences." Martha stood up. "We're leaving now. We'll keep the recording safe," she said calmly. "We'll decide what to do after talking with our family." Walter and Carol sat wordless. Their world had collapsed in an instant. "Ryan, pack your things," Martha told her son. "We're going home today." Ryan nodded and left the room. Martha stared at Amanda. The girl covered her face with both hands, sobbing. "Amanda," Martha said quietly. "What you did isn't something that can be easily forgiven. But I won't hate you. That would only hurt me more." Martha slowly left the room. In the entrance hall, she paused and took a deep breath. Family photos adorned the walls. Who would have thought such dark emotions lurked behind those seemingly happy smiles? John followed her and put his arm around her shoulders. "Are you okay?" "Yes," Martha smiled weakly. "At least we now know the truth." 6 months later, spring sunlight streamed through the windows of Martha's suburban Boston home. On the living room sofa, she cradled her 2-week-old daughter, Emily. Martha smiled as she listened to the soft breathing of the little girl. "Mom, is Emily awake?" Ryan quietly entered the room. His eyes showed infinite love for his sister. "Not yet. But it's almost time for her milk," Martha answered gently. Since Thanksgiving Day, their lives had changed dramatically. Martha and John reported the incident to the police, and Amanda was sent to a juvenile justice program. She was placed on probation and required to undergo psychological counseling. The relationship with Charlotte remained strained. Martha had heard that her sister acknowledged responsibility for her daughter's actions and was receiving family therapy. There had been only one contact with her parents, Walter and Carol, after the birth. They had sent a card congratulating the birth of their grandchild, but they hadn't met in person. The doorbell rang. John went to answer. "Martha," he called. "It's your parents." Martha looked up in surprise. Walter and Carol stood modestly in the hallway. Her mother's eyes were red, and her father wore an anxious expression. "May we come in?" Carol asked in a trembling voice. Martha nodded, holding Emily close to her chest. They quietly entered the living room. "Is she our new granddaughter?" Walter asked in a small voice. Yes, Martha answered. Emily Hope Brown. Tears fell from Carol's eyes. We are truly sorry for hurting you and your family. We made mistakes in how we shared our love, Walter added. We indulged Charlotte and Amanda excessively and neglected you and your family. The result was. His voice choked. Martha looked at her daughter in silence for a while. The feelings of anger and resentment had faded. What remained was sadness and a desire to repair family bonds. How is Amanda? Martha finally asked. She's taking counseling seriously, Carol answered. She's beginning to understand the gravity of what happened. She wants to meet you and Emily. Martha took a deep breath. I need time. But someday. At that moment, Emily began to make small crying sounds. Walter and Carol leaned forward in surprise. Would you like to hold her? Martha asked her mother after hesitating. Carol extended trembling hands and carefully took the baby. Hello, Emily, her voice was filled with love. I'm your grandma. Walter sat beside her, peering at his small granddaughter's face. She is beautiful. Ryan quietly returned to the room. Grandpa, Grandma, he greeted them, albeit with some hesitation. Ryan, Walter turned to his grandson. You were truly brave. And you did the right thing. Martha felt tears in her eyes. There was still a long way to go for complete forgiveness, but maybe this was a new beginning. She looked out the window. The spring sunlight seemed to promise the birth of new life and the healing of old wounds.